Four papers are what we're definitely going to look at today. We're talking about the Punch, the Vanguard, the Nation, and These Days. The Punch will definitely start things up today. And on the Punch newspaper, the leading story reads all about the doctors. Doctors to decide on nationwide strike today is a major one. And just a rider to that, National Association of Resident Doctors and NEC meets to review government response to demand as NAMED decries $1 billion yearly spending on medical tourism. But I'll tell you to read that story on page 7 and 29 of the Punch. Let's quickly take some other leading stories at the front or the top mass of the Punch, still on the front newspaper. No immediate plan to implement fuel surcharge, and these are credited to the federal government, and page 24 has the story. 2027 presidency, Jonathan split South-South PDP. It's a major one on page 2. 31 state domestic debt hits 2.57 trillion, and page 23 has that very big story. Nupeng suspends strike as Dangote accepts union's demand. We'll say hallelujah to that, but go grab a copy of that and go to page 23. Let's see if we take some other leading story at the side mass of the Punch this morning. PDP, SAN protest, the Senate blocks Natasha return. It's another screamer on page 18. And 5 soldiers, a sad one. Terrorists fear killed in Zamfara clash. And you can get that on page 18. South Africa dents Eagles World Cup hopes after stalemate. Is one that made most men did not sleep well yesterday. It's on page 31. And vehicle theft, 3 Nigerians jailed 96 years in Ghana. And page 4 and 5 have that story. And you wonder, is it G-Wagon? Osun kingmakers reject move to dethrone jailed monarch. It's a major story on page 28. But quickly, the picture of the day is that of the 18th Banking and Finance Annual Conference meeting held yesterday in Abuja.
Let's see the story this morning. A DSS broker truce ends Nupeng's strike threat, and the rider says refinery workers free to join unions. Well, you can read more of that story on page 2 of the Nation newspaper. Let's see what we have at the top mass. A Federal Inland Revenue Service, EFCC partner to enforce tax compliance. Well, you can read that on page 7. National Inland Waterways Authority digs deep to curb boat accident, and the rider says no life jacket, no boarding. Well, that's on page 4 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the side mass. 47 students get 47 million naira laptops. Well, that's on page 2 of the paper. Let's see what we have at the bottom mass. Encomiums for doing a beyond at Night of Tributes. Well, that's on page 3 of the paper. President directs urgent action on power crisis in hospitals. You can read more of that on page 4 of the paper. Let's see what we have as the picture of the day. We can see dignitaries standing among the national scholars who received award during the midterm assessment of Renewed Hope initiative in Abuja yesterday. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on the Nation newspaper. Let's see what the Guardian has for us this morning. Yeah, the top story, federal government under pressure as DMO blames the forex exchange, global shocks for rising debt. So that's on page 6 of the paper. Let's go to the top mass. Nupeng suspends strike as Dangote agrees to unionize workers. That's on page 3. Delta slashes dialysis cost, expands health reforms. That's on page 29. A PDP Labour Party orders placing its move to stop Natasha's resumption. That's on page 3 of the paper. Let's go to the bottom mass. Nepal on edge as Prime Minister, key ministers resign over alleged graft and social media ban. That's on page 6 of the paper. Flight delays, disruption, NCAA summons domestic airlines to Abuja. That's on page 5. Reps fume, summon minister over Abuja Kaduna rail derailment. That's on page 30 of the paper. No immediate plan to implement 5% fuel tax, says Edun, amid pushback from OPS and CSOs. That's on page 16 of the paper. Federal government overhauls social register to support over 70 million citizens. That's on page 7 of the paper. And the picture of the day is that of the major headline, which is still talking about the DMO, that is the Debt Management Office, attributing Nigerians' increasing debt burden to foreign exchange issues and global economic shock. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on the Guardian newspaper. Let's see what this day has for us today. The major story reads, DSS brokers choose as oil workers call off nationwide strike. And we're taking one rider. Parties agree to allow unionization based on free will. Well, you can read more of that story on page 9 of the paper. Edun Oyedele say no plan to implement 5% fuel surcharge in January. And rider to that says, explain commencement order must be issued and gazetted. Well, that's on page 9 of the paper. Natasha citing pending appeal court case, and a National Assembly blocks senators' resumption despite suspension expiration. And the rider says PDP condemns moves to stop her resumption. Well, you can read that on page 9 of the paper. Let's see the picture of the day. Okay, we can see economic leaders and financial leaders gathered in Abuja for the 18th Banking and Finance Annual Conference yesterday in Abuja. Well, that's all we're taking this morning on this day. Up next is the Vanguard.
On the Vanguard, which will be the last paper for us to quickly review, world leaders, envoys condemn Israel attack on Qatar. And they attacked Qatar yesterday. Hamas leaders were aware who they were really after. Attack reaction to Monday's Jerusalem shooting, says Netanyahu. And I'll just tell you to get more of that story on page 5. Let's quickly see other major stories right there. How kidnapped major was rescued in Delta community is a cheering one on page 6. Gridlock as flash floods take over Lagos roads, paralyzes businesses. It's a disturbing one on page 7. Will brand Nigeria as global culinary powerhouse, and Kele Jaye is giving us that assurance on page 15. Federal government gazettes tax reform laws implementation begins January 2026. And yet, well, they are saying that will not be, but I'll just implore you to get more of that story on page 19. New curriculum, don't implement in hurry, expert tells federal government on page 16. We're talking about the side mass of the Vanguard because we're just quickly really trying to run off with more of it. 2027, more governors, senators, rep eager to join APC, says APC chairman. I'll be having a critical look later on the state of the nation. I'll be looking at all of that later on Dialogue. Nupeng suspends strike after DSS brokered truce with Dangote. Is a cheering one for most Nigerians on page 8, but what is not cheering is Eagle draw against Bafana. Bafana sad for Nigerian football. Akpeyi seems to be crying that out loud on page 31. Tinubu bold reform, proof of political will in executing economic policies, a major one as coming from the Vice President himself, Kashim Shettima on page 9. Expiration of suspension, PDP kicks, our Senate denies Natasha resumption. And I'll just tell you to resume more of that story on page 8. But the picture of the day is, you can see the Vice President himself at the 66th NES annual conference. And also that was held yesterday in Abuja. Well, that's the much you can take from the dailies.